Hello, my name is Connor, and this past semester, I did an internship in Boston at a startup called Sheprd. And Sheprd is basically a ride-sharing service, kind of like an Uber or Lyft, but it's directed towards kids in grades K through 12. You might have seen them around Newton, because Newton is their target market. So my interest in startups started around middle school, and I started watching the show called Shark Tank, which you might have watched before. And basically, a person will come on with a business idea and pitch their idea in front of a bunch of investors, and the investors can decide to invest or not. And then later on, I saw the movie The Social Network, which is about the founding of Facebook, which you've probably heard of. What drew me to these type of people was that they were very rebellious, and they kind of were following their own ideas. And I thought this was a really cool concept. And basically since this time, I've always thought that I kind of wanted to work in a startup when I was older. So fast forward to this past fall, and I heard about the CAPS program. So the CAPS program is second semester seniors here at North can decide to do an internship or a research project. And I thought, if I really want to do this, why don't I try it out? Because how do I know if I like it if I don't try it out? So also this past fall, there was an entrepreneurship day held in the big theater over there. And one of the speakers, named Nick, happened to be the founder of Sheprd. And I really related to his talk because, one, I thought personally, on a personal level, we were very similar. And I thought the idea that he had would have been very relevant to me 5 years ago if it had existed. So I decided out of the blue to email him, and he responded and agreed to let me do the internship. So when I started my internship, I didn't really know what to do because I had seen these movies that represented the very, very small portion when they reached their success, but I didn't know on a daily basis what it meant to work in a smaller company versus working in a larger company. I didn't know the tasks I was doing, so it was very open going into my first day. There was a lot I didn't know. So going into my internship, this is kind of what I expected to be in a working environment. I've never worked in a professional environment before. I've only worked in school, really. And this is kind of what I was expecting. Cubicles, strict hierarchy of management, boring meetings maybe. And that was basically what I was expecting going in. But this is what it actually looked like. So it really did not look like an office. My office was at Spaces, which is on Newbury Street in Boston. And it's a co-working space with a bunch of other businesses. So as you can see, it's very bright, colorful, collaborative. And also in the back, you can't really see, but there's a whole line of bicycles. So it really doesn't look like an office at all. And as I went along in my internship, I realized that this was kind of representative of the whole working environment overall. Our company would work with other companies inside Spaces, even though it didn't directly relate to us. There was another company that was a biotech company that had no relation to driving kids around. But that being said, they still were able to help us because all startups have to go through the same thing. They have to be able to raise money. They have to be able to get new customers. It's something that they all can relate to. So the collaborative nature of my internship, I really enjoyed. So my first day, I get there, and like I said before, I had no idea what I was going to do going in. I could have been doing anything. So the first task I had to do was I had to fill out this application, and it was for the Venture Forum competition. And it was a pitch competition similar to Shark Tank, but it was held in Worcester. And I had to fill out the application. I thought, okay, that's going to be easy enough. But I started filling out this application, and I realized one of the questions just that I remember specifically was what is the EBITDA of your company in 2022? And at first I thought it was Spanish, but then I realized it wasn't Spanish. And I needed to figure out how I was going to figure that out because I'd been there one day and had no idea how to answer that. So, like I had learned to do, the first thing I was going to do was go to get help. I went to my supervisor. In school, that's what we're taught. We're told if you don't know something, go talk to your teacher, go to X block, find out what you need to do to learn what you need to learn. And I sat down and talked with him, and what he told me is that sometimes when you're working in a startup, you just have to try to figure it out on your own, even if it's not the most efficient measure, because everyone is reliant on each other, and if one person slows down the rest of us, then that's just how it is. So how I figured out the specific problem was there was a Google Drive that was shared with me, and I just missed it. So that was my bad. But after that, I think it was still a good lesson that I learned. So this was kind of what got me thinking about the relationship between school and like a workplace environment, because like I said before, this was the first time that I had ever worked in a workplace environment. And going in, I thought that this was going to be like kind of a rebellious school kind of thing, like I wasn't going to school, like I was working in a professional environment. And I didn't think that school wasn't going to help me, but I wasn't really expecting it to help me later on. But I think in more ways than I expected, it did help me. So one example of this was I had to create a script for a video we were making to teach our drivers how to use, we had like the Google Maps type of app, so they knew how to drive the kids around, and I had to write the script. And I had never written a video script before, that's just something I hadn't had to do. But as I was writing, I realized that it was very, very similar. Like, it might not have been like an essay, but I was still following a 5-paragraph essay like format that I've been doing since 7th grade. It was just in disguise. Like it had a beginning, middle, and end. There were subpoints under each main thing. So I think, and then another example of this was I had to create a depreciation model for the vehicles that Sheprd owns. And it was the exact same thing I was doing math. It was slopes, it was rates, it was the same exact thing, just it was a more practical application. So overall, I think there was more tied in between school and the workplace than I thought there was going to be. So on a daily basis, I did a variety of different things. That was one of the things I liked. I was always doing something new. So on the top, I put decals on the cars. I did weekly vehicle checks to make sure they were meeting legal requirements, and then all sorts of other research type projects that they just didn't really have anyone having time to work on. And one of the things I noticed is that every task, like even if a task wasn't interesting, so putting a decal on the car after doing it is not an interesting task. However, I wouldn't call it boring, because I think boring is more something that you do when you don't have a good motivation to do it. But even though the task itself wasn't interesting to do, I knew that I was doing it because it was the thing that they needed most to be done, and they wouldn't have given me that task if they didn't need someone to do it and it wasn't a pressing issue. Another thing I noticed was there was a lot of interdisciplinary work, so people who were focused on one area would a lot of times have to go outside their area and work in a different area. One example of this was I had a coworker named Taylor, and Taylor